a very warm welcome to everyone. With the advent of OpenAI's ChatGPT in late 2022, it seems like since then, people have been throwing bouquets and brickbats at artificial intelligence. And this is said to have created a perfect storm for AI companies in India as well. At the same time, looking at the groundbreaking applications of AI and the potential bad actors it can bring out, there may need to be responsible and ethical AI development for the betterment of humanity. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, has called for a global framework on the expansion of ethical AI tools. The Indian Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, has also remarked that India would regulate AI. As we operate in what is described as the golden age of artificial intelligence, how can innovation and ethical concerns be balanced? Can fairness and transparency in AI systems be ensured? To talk more on this, I have two speakers from India's two law firms. Please help me welcome Tanu Banerjee and Arjun Goswami. Tanu and Arjun, my sheer pleasure and privilege to welcome you on this episode of the RegTech series. Very meaningful conversation I'm looking forward to. But what a topic. We literally have unleashed a monster in the face of generative AI. And now we are asking ourselves, how do we regulate this? In fact, people and experts from the West are getting increasingly more and more concerned about the implication and perhaps more so about the bad actors which AI can unleash. Tanu, women on the panel, let's begin with you and let's get to Arjun. What do you think? Yes.
Thanks, Shreya, and thanks for having me, first of all. I too sort of agree. Of course, we have unleashed, massive potential, but I wouldn't, call it an animal as much as I still think it's a great opportunity. It has the potential to transform, not just businesses. I think our daily lives eventually, right, the way we function. It's just that, of course, it's new. We are perhaps still in very early and primitive stages of, what use cases of AI would be and how it will develop eventually, how efficient it may eventually become. So I do see a huge potential and a huge opportunity for all of us. But of course, this is the primitive nascent stage where AI has sort of come in. It does pose risks and it does pose challenges, as is true with any new technology. Back in the day when internet just came about, we all had, no idea what internet would become. Today, we can't imagine our lives without it, right? So I think we are, at the cusp of that at the moment. And eventually, of course, it does need a look into how do we regulate, what are the right frameworks to put in place. Where do we strike the balance between innovation and regulation and user harm and risks, and so on, that we'll, perhaps talk about later in the episode. So, my perspective on it is that, yes, it is a massive technology. It has potential to transform not just businesses, our overall lives. And what is needed is a deep dive into what is the right framework to put together. And I think from that standpoint, we are all, on the right path at the moment.
Okay. Arjun,
that's my take on it.
Sure. Arjun, I come to you now. What Tanu mentioned, that with the advent of every new technology, there are concerns, there are risks and rewards associated with it. But never have we really questioned the entire existence of human race as such. Because artificial intelligence is not really a new phenomenon. It's been there for a while. It was artificial intelligence, more like machine learning. But what really has changed the nature of the game is the advent of generative AI. Right? I mean, we really thought that AI would be relegated to more first generation industries, machines, and factories, but it's really come for the creative bit now. It has come after content guys, it has come after people, lawyers, teachers, literally everyone. So I want to understand that, and just why I use the word unleashing the monster, really, because we were all thinking, okay, we are the creative people, nothing can really touch us. But look at what ChatGPT really has done. I really want to understand from you. Do you kind of agree with Tanu fully? Because I don't really know. Do you think that it can be taken as any other new technology like fintech or something, or is it really has much more far-reaching impact, and which is why the regulation of AI just becomes so much more imminent right now?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me on the panel. And I overall I really do agree with Tanu. I mean, there are, and it's such an exciting time to be a lawyer dealing with technology. There's just been no better time. It's just so exciting. There are matters of first impression that are coming up before us where the rule book is yet to be written, and AI is maybe one of the most exciting areas. And the aspects of AI, I mean, I was just trying to think through it the other day. There are so many, and I'm sure I won't capture it all, but yes, there's machine learning, which different types of platforms would use to make predictions. There's natural language processing. That's the sort of started from Alexa and now has gone to Chat GPT and Bard and so on. Then you've got robotics, the prospect of self-driven cars for a driver who has difficulty driving on the Delhi roads. What a prospect, right? Robotic surgery, face recognition technology. I mean, these are huge opportunities, and generative AI doing things with art that haven't been done before. Now, inevitably, when you have that kind of a very powerful technology, of course, there are risks of harms, which we have to manage. But I think that is a management of risks with maybe possibly a small sliver of things which are so harmful or unlawful that you might want to prohibit it. But you want to keep that balance between unleashing innovation and managing risk. And ever since the 19th century, when the first industrial revolution really came, and you had people who were Luddites saying that you can break the machines, well, that didn't work. Maybe the difference now is, and I read this somewhere, that whilst that affected, for want of a better expression, blue collar workers, now no class of workers will be accepted, ourselves, Tanu and me included, right, as lawyers. So we're not, in looking at this, we're aware that it's going to change our own industry, but that's necessary. It's an opportunity with risk management, to me.
Okay, so
I think just quickly adding to that, I think my take is not that it is just like any other technology, right? Technology has different facets, different aspects, and different use cases also. Of course, it is it is one of the most powerful technologies today that is developing, right? There are no two ways about that. And it's a technology that has so many facets to itself, right? So many use cases in different industries across different professionals and different creative work. You spoke of Chat GPT, for example, generative AI. It is only one facet of what AI overall as technology is, right? What I mean to say is that yes, it is the most powerful technology perhaps that humans have created so far. But what I was trying to say is that as with any other new technology, right, it has massive potential and therefore it has massive risks associated with it also. And what's important is that we are aware of it and we work around.
True. And I think both you and Arjun are completely on the same page in it. That whilst there's huge gamut of opportunities, but Shrija, we also need to be aware of the risk. And beautifully pointed with both of you that this point needs to be driven home, that it is opportunity, but there also risk and to balance both. So
By the way, Shrija, I mean, Tanu and I have never spoken about this before to each other. So there's
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, so I want to understand more in terms of like, is it a playbook for this that, and perhaps the global conversation or the global narrative around AI regulation seems to be leaning more towards the United Kingdom, right? Of course, there's this entire big sort of summit underway, and this entire conversation about the AI diplomacy and having a global standard for AI regulation is in the works. So, what really should the playbook look like? Should the rules of the game be different from a developed country like the UK and a developing country like India? My personal view, and it could be a contrarian, interesting view, which I sort of had, is that perhaps the big tech is actually using India the way the big pharma companies use us as guinea pigs, right? I mean, look at ChatGPT, for instance. With every prompt that Indians are doing, we are actually enhancing the platform. So there's a reason they have made it free, right? So and because they know we are the nation with so many people, we are tech savvy, number one, and we know the language, number two. So we, with every prompt, we are bettering their platform, right? So I want to understand this entire AI regulation conversation. How does one go around it? How does one pursue this? What should be like the rule book, the playbook for this? Because something as dynamic as this, there's no body of work behind to sort of refer to, or is there is? Yeah, Arjun and Tanu, yes.
Okay, so maybe let me have a go, and I'm sure Tanu will come up with a better answer. But I think very interesting question, right? In terms of, I mean, there are lots of global jurisdictions that are moving forward on this. We know this is true of the EU, who've come out with, you know, their new EU AI Act as of June this year, the OECD principles. The Americans are, you know, experimenting at different state levels. We've come out with certain principles. I mean, every framework is trying to balance the risk against the opportunity. But that balance for us is of special importance because we are aiming to become a $5 trillion economy, out of which 1 trillion is supposed to come from the digital economy. And this part of the digital economy, the AI-driven part of it, as Tanu was rightly saying, is potentially the most powerful, right? It's huge in its impacts. So we should have peculiarly, if you like, a peculiarly Indian framework that takes into account that drive and that opportunity that the digital economy powered by AI could afford us to leapfrog and move forward very powerfully. You're not wrong that there are risks attendant to it. And we should take account of those risks and take account of the experiences that the Europeans and the Americans and others are going through so that we manage that. But I don't think our playbook should be a carbon copy of what they're producing. They have something which is very strongly anchored around human rights and human values and, you know, all those kinds of issues. And those are relevant in their context. In our context, maybe the balance will be different. Now, you know, to me, we shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all. We should have coexistence of these different rules, which is appropriate for a multipolar world, where we are able to fashion things in terms of a balance that fits us, that isn't a carbon copy of them. That's my thought on this.
Tanu, what is your view? Yeah, Arjun has said that you would give a better answer. He has been like very, very kind to you from the very, very beginning.
No, I already know she's cleverer than me, so over to you.
Here goes
Thanks,
the
Arjun. Very, very encouraging. But I in terms of views, I don't differ from Arjun on that account as well. And Shreya, to your point that are we the guinea pigs, right? That's the center of your question, right? Um, Perhaps my take there would be, of course, we are larger in number, right? We are larger in number, we are a younger population, and therefore, automatically more savvy to adopt technology, right? But I think the opportunity from there also is that we are also very high on innovation. We are also very quick to identify issues, right? And when you're quick to identify issues, you're perhaps quicker to resolve issues as well, right? So I think where there is a risk, there is a pro, there is always a con, and vice versa. So I see it as that. I think India is very ahead in its game around AI, whether that is innovation or regulation. If you look at our MeitY, for example, they're way ahead in terms of identifying issues, talking with stakeholders. They've just a couple of days back they came up with a expert committee report also. And if you take a look at that, it's not that they're wanting to just follow the format that EU or China or US are following, right? Of course, those nations are different. They are perhaps more developed. They lean towards a stricter regime, but we're not necessarily copying them. Perhaps we will borrow principles from there. But there is definitely a focus around balancing innovation. India is an innovative country. We have perhaps the maximum number of entrepreneurs, especially in the tech industry, right? If you look at what the government's approach is, they're wanting to set up center of excellence that will partner with startups. MeitY has come up with a proposal around how to fund these startups, how to fund upskilling. There's so many aspects that are already looked into, right? Which perhaps the other jurisdictions haven't looked at yet, right? They're more focused around how to make a strict regime around things, right? And EU Act, like Arjun also mentioned, the approach there is again, largely around safety and risk mitigation. They're trying to categorize different AI tools basis, their risk impact and so on. Whereas we are perhaps more focused around, how to regulate deployment of emerging technologies, right? That's the principle that we are looking at, and how to identify user harm, how to focus on safety. But the idea is not to, not to sort of come in the way of innovation. So my, just overall take is that we're perhaps not guinea pigs. We are perhaps the largest opportunity for any big tech, any technology tool. But that opportunity is as much ours as is anybody else, right? So I still, would leave that on a positive note. And I think what our government is doing, they're all on the right track in terms of, what is the framework that works best for India. And I think that's the roadmap that was followed for our privacy regulations as well, right? EU was the first one to come up with GDPR, which is by far the strictest regime, but it's not that we've just copied it. We came up with our own framework, which is way more balanced than GDPR because it works for our jurisdiction. I would predict, or I would forecast that it will be the same path for AI as well.
Okay, so to Arjun and Tanu, again, both of you on the same page that we will not be the carbon copy. And perhaps the digital data protection bill has set the ball rolling in the right direction. If you look at the EU, they have been extremely prescriptive, very, very strict. And when you look at India, they have actually become very innovative and very balanced in this entire gross data protection. Now, I have a concern that even when I speak to startup founders and investors, I actually see the entire data conversation missing. It is not as much as it should be there. Do you think the same is happening with AI? There's so much of hype in terms of funding, there's so much of excitement. Do you think that somewhere this entire regulation aspect is being completely overlooked, which can definitely make or mar the trajectory of this new kind of investable, exciting idea? Yes.
So, okay, let me have a go. And maybe I should have said ladies first. It would have made my life much easier. But anyway, I'll do this, and the next one, Tanu can go first. I mean, I think in terms of this process that that we're going through with technology, I think one thing is pretty inevitable, which is that the pace and the disruptive power of technology will always outpace regulation. It is impossible virtually for regulation to keep up. If we say that we're going to stay ahead of regulation, ahead of innovation, in a disruptive sector like technology, the chances are we'll be strangling innovation. Now, of course, there will, as a result of that regulatory lag, be some element of risk whilst things go on without adequate regulation. And, we've seen that now with data privacy, although, there was a Puthaswamy judgment, which was there from several years ago. Eventually, we've caught up. The speed and power of AI is forcing policy thinkers to move faster. And I entirely agree with Tanu that the sophistication and thinking of our policymakers is really tremendous. It's really huge. I mean, when you really sit down at the table with them and interact with them, you can sense how deep their thinking is. They're doing global benchmarking. They're thinking about different types of technology. They're holding all kinds of focus group meetings. They are not at all arrogant about this. They are seeking information. They're reaching out to industry. They're reaching out to law firms. I mean, this is a very, very good sign for us, to my mind. Over to you, Tanu.
Yeah.
That's been, fairly my experience as well with the government bodies, specifically the current government, the team that's looking into technology as a space. Look at, for example, what they're doing with the Digital India Act also, right? They've done consultations across the country, not just sitting out of Delhi, in one office expecting people to come to them. They've literally gone, to different cities, different states, invited different stakeholders, and you would be surprised the amount of participation that there is between, the government and the stakeholders. And some of those stakeholders involve, startup entrepreneurs, law firms, lawyers, think tanks. You see everybody who's perhaps, has a stake in the overall tech dynamic. People are there and they're talking to people. So I don't think that, it may seem like on the surface that, there isn't enough discussion or there isn't enough thought around it. But I don't think so. And if you look at even the reports that they've come up with, even, the blueprints that they've come up with around regulation, they're very exhaustive. Right? They have taken into account what are the needs of the startup industry, what are the needs of, innovators, for example, whether that is funding or setting up research and development centers, helping people to upskill, tying up with institutions, educational bodies. They've thought it through, right? So I don't sort of think that there isn't enough talk about it. I think there is ample.
Yeah, I was talking more from the funding aspect.
Funding. Is your question sort of related to kind of a froth of funding,
Exactly,
which is sort of excess?
Yes. So will you think the attractiveness of the sector will sort of really come down a little with the regulation question and concern? For instance, look at what happened with fintech, right? I mean, now there is a whole sort of swath of challenges around the sector. The entrepreneurs who who are not on the right side of the regulation had to have to understand it perhaps better. So there's always an understanding of a space that goes with the time. Both of you mentioned that, yeah.
No. I'm going to defer to Tanu this time.
Yeah, I have a small, my thought is just that I think that it's perhaps not entirely accurate to compare AI to the fintech industry, right? Fintech is a financially driven industry, right? It's not just the regulator of technology or Ministry of Broadcasting that's the stakeholder there. There is the Reserve Bank of India because there's exchange of money there, right? So perhaps comparing the two demographics of technology, if I may say, is perhaps not very accurate. But I mean, in terms of, is it going to reduce the attractiveness of the sector? If that's what is the opportunity in terms of raising capital? What is the opportunity in terms of innovating, scaling it up? I don't think that will be the case, simply because I think the approach of our government is balanced at the moment, right? They are trying to set up institutions which would in fact help startups raise capital. So my thought at the moment is, we all have to wait and watch exactly how it would impact. But I don't think, it's fair to compare it with the fintech industry.
So from the angle and from the lens of the way I see it, I personally feel that both Arjun and Tanu, that if we talk about AI, and I'm talking specifically about generative AI also, I see more risks. And of course, the government can really be, the motivations could be different. Both you and Arjun pointed out that the lens of the UK, the EU is perhaps different, and our lens is different. Their lens is more around human rights. Our lens is more around not stifling innovation. We have the motivation of becoming a 5 trillion economy. We want to attract private capital. But AI is actually a horizontal technology which has impact on all sectors: healthcare, we talk about finance, fintech, people, representation, content in a big way. So, and big tech is only becoming more and more powerful now with the advent of AI, right? So, in this pursuit of attracting capital, not stifling innovation, what will be your piece of advice to the regulator when they put this framework together? That are we overlooking a few things? Perhaps it is time to be a little more stricter around AI.
No, I mean, I think there are two aspects to this. One is, what Tanu was pointing to, which is that there is going to be, because of the pace of AI, a certain creative destruction process that will take place at the beginning. Because you'll have a lot of startups, some will succeed, some will fail. It's in the nature of PE investment, angel investment that comes in, early startup cycle, that's going to happen, and that's the nature of the market. Now, which ones are going to do best? Well, in the end, apart from having a business model and an application that really, meets demand, it's going to be the ones that can manage the variety of risks best as a business. The challenge for the regulator is, and Tanu is absolutely spot on right, it's so different from fintech because the areas of risk and harm are so different. They're spread across different areas. So just to expand on my thought a little bit, I mean, I was just thinking about this. I mean, you can have things to do with societal bias, right? In the way in which AI is applied. That requires one type of regulation. You can have financial loss because of faulty predictions, whether it's stock markets or weather or whatever. That's a different type of regulation. You can have IPR issues, because you were referring several times, Shrija, to generative AI. Well, it's generating articles and poetry and whatnot. Well, it's going to have IPR issues. There could be physical harm issues if robotic surgical devices malfunction. So it's not going to be possible to simply have one regulator looking at everything in a single lens manner in the way in which it was possible for fintech. That is what makes this challenging, but it's also what a wonderful opportunity for lawyers to work across different spaces, right? It's I keep coming back to that. It's great for Tanu and me.
Absolutely. It keeps
us
on our toes.
Business for you all. It's more business for you all. More billables for you all, definitely.
No, we actually, a lot of the stuff we're doing, I mean, to be fair, and I mean, I've done the work for the government as well under NDAs and so on. Both Tanu and I, participate in consultation processes, etc., really in the public interest. We're not doing this just for billables. We know that at this stage, it's a matter of creating the market and creating the rules for the market. And we're happy to invest in that, because ultimately, if you have a good market with good rules around it, yes, eventually everybody will benefit, ourselves included. But we're genuinely trying to look at it that way. Just a slight corrective on the notion of that we're just chasing the billables.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think you can chase the bills in this area. Right? It is truly thought leadership to my mind, right? And that's what really is motivating. Whether to liaise with stakeholders or clients or individuals or government bodies, that everybody across. It's very interesting, but what drives it is thought leadership entirely, right? To come back to risks, Arjun, of course, articulated the most the most obvious risks as such. There is, of course, risk of displacement of resources and so on, which we're bound to see it across industries, ours industry included, I think, at the beginning. But I think eventually what will happen is that, people will upskill themselves. The way of our working will, perhaps change. There will be perhaps newer roles that, we can't think of today, but they will come up. So my thought around risks, etc., is there is generative AI has massive risk around copyright ownership. Right, India is way behind. We are talking of AI regulation, but our Copyright Act, which is the basic act when it comes to generative AI, that itself is not up to speed at the moment. We don't know who owns it, if who owns the product that is generated by AI. So those are issues that everyone's aware of those issues, so to say. But like I said, I think it's a transitionary space. We will all eventually upskill ourselves. We will all eventually adapt ourselves. And if you ask me, there is no other way. AI is the future, right? There is no other way. There's no value in resisting it, to my mind.
So I think this AI is the future conversations again, where I'm coming to. And it was a very interesting conversation. I was talking to Kunal Shah of CRED, and I was trying to understand from him about this entire AI piece. And he made this interesting comment that upskilling won't be able to catch up with AI, because the speed at which AI is updating itself and the speed at which humans will upskill, it will never match. And I think it's also a question, the larger point is also about narrative building. So 3 years prior, all of us, I think if Tanu and I remember Tanu and I having the discussion around it also, a very wide discussion on content and IPR. And we were doing it in the context of virtual reality and IPR and all of that. 3 years back, I'm telling you, Arjun and Tanu, both of us were like, metaverse is the future, Shrija, metaverse. 2 years back, Again, I'm telling you, the same conversation, Shrija, I'm telling you, the future is crypto and Bitcoin. We still don't understand. Now, 2023, the future is artificial intelligence. So I think we were going to think ourselves that who is creating these narratives? These narratives also creating from the valley. One is big tech, which is fueling this umpteen amount of money. And second is the VCs carrying so much money. So I think these narratives also self-serving to them because they create these as thought influencers. They put so much capital behind it. And then, I mean, where is metaverse? Is it lost? Where is Bitcoin? I want to ask. Where is cryptocurrency? And now it is AI. So I am very, very wary of what is the future now. I think our future is still being made as we speak. And but to your point, Tanu and Arjun, I agree 110% that in terms of regulation, and because I've had conversations with quite a few people, especially on what the digital data protection bill has done, it's been exemplary in terms of the body of work. And perhaps that could serve as an example of what the AI regulation could look like. As we move towards the last 4 to 5 minutes of the conversation, this time I'll come to you, Tanu. The lens. What should really be the lens to look at for the AI regulation? Rishi Sunak made this provocative statement about AI Safety Institute, for instance. Of course, let's take the politics out of it. There are different multilateral concerns on that. How should India as a country, and Arjun also mentioned that our motivations are different. Our ambition is to be a factual economy. What should the lens really be about when you think about AI regulation? Yeah.
So, Rishija, the lens, of course, the first lens to look at is, to my mind, definitely that it poses and how to mitigate those. Second would be how our users of AI in different facets are going to be impacted, and how can they be safeguarded. So trust, safety, user harm, traceability. Those are perhaps broader contours that I think should be kept in mind. I also think, and those principles are, they're already there. I think the government is aware of that. They are focused around that, and whatever they're developing, it is the focal point. I would think some of the other things that we could all think about, and perhaps even the government could think about, is just what sort of policies should eventually come about, right? And when I say policies, not just national policies in terms of regulations, right? But how do we help organizations, for example, to develop their internal policies around use of AI, right? That's something to think about. Could there be policies for developers, for example, who are coming up with newer AI tools, right? Could we think about, could we think about policies around developers being required to assess the risks that a particular tool may have before it is released to the world, right? At the moment, for example, generative AI came about, everyone was excited about it. And then we figured out, okay, there are risks of privacy and bias and, so on. I think it perhaps be helpful to flip it a little bit, and make the developers responsible to think about the potentials and think about the risks that their tool or their technology poses, and somebody to review it, evaluate it, perhaps before it's released to everybody, right? I think perhaps a little bit of thought around that would really help at the moment.
Okay. Arjun, you want to sort of take it further from what Tanu said in terms of lens on building the playbook? Yes.
Sure. So she's given such an excellent jumping off board. The way I'd see it is kind of at three levels. If I was to take her points a bit further, there is a global partnership on AI, and we shouldn't just be rule takers. We really should participate in that so that our perspective is brought to bear. This is the right way forward after what we've done on G20. We shouldn't stop here simply because the G20 chairmanship goes somewhere else. So that's one. Two, Tanu is absolutely right. At the national level, there have been a whole series of reports, Niti Aayog's reports, the METI reports, the NASSCOM toolkit, etc. They all have, good principles and, ways of operationalizing. What is crucial in that regulatory, if I was to look at that lens, is things which are really unlawful and harmful are things that should focus on, right? So that there is a sharp focus, laser-like, on that narrow band of things where really there should be some prohibition. And if I was to take Tanu's point about, corporate efforts further, and I completely agree with it, we're now, I think, in a co-regulatory space in this. Businesses must take some responsibility under that co-regulation. So what would that mean? They would have to look at the completeness and accuracy of their data sets. They would have to look at robust training standards. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but they absolutely should do that. They should properly explain sensitive AI products. They should try and push for human oversight. They should push for cybersecurity. All those are things which corporates are in the best position, business entities are in the best position to take forward. So this can be a real partnership between business, government, and together at the international level. I think if we do that, the future looks bright.
Thanks, Tanu and Arjun. What a meaningful conversation, really, on RegTech. Who would have imagined a topic like RegTech could sort of evolve into such an interesting conversation? We agreed, and I think Tanu and I disagreed more in the large part of that on various aspects, but that is what makes for a very creative conversation, and I love such conversations. And I'm very, very sure that this has actually left food for thought on various topics. Thank you so much for joining in, Tanu and Arjun. Till then, I see you next. Goodbye and good luck, and we should do more of this. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.